All righty. Hello and welcome everyone to another Lunchtime Discovery series. Thank you for joining us for today's program. My name is Wolf Freund and I'm a community engagement specialist for Moorhead Planetarium and Science Center, as well as a local filmmaker. I will be your host today while Chris is away. The Lunchtime Discovery series is coordinated by the North Carolina Office of Environmental Education within the Department of Environmental Quality and broadcast by the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. I'm excited to include my organization in the partnership today, and in fact, I've been a longtime friend of the Lunchtime Discovery series. You may recall my talk that I did here back in October of 2021 when I was talking about kayaking and conversations about climate change. And I even released that film as a documentary called Connected by Water. As a science and nature lover, I'm very excited to meet today's guest to hear about her film Stuffed. This is also because she is a successful documentarian and historian with multiple features and series and hundreds of hours of interviews recorded. As a reminder to our viewers today, we will take your questions. As questions arise, please type them into the chat here on YouTube, and we will ask them after the presentation by our guest speaker. For today's program, we are very excited to recognize Women's History Month, and all month long, we'll be hearing stories and experiences of women doing great things. Allow me to introduce you to today's guest, the owner of History Boutique Films, an award-winning documentary and historian, Erin Derham. Welcome, Erin.
Thank you so much, Will. I'm so happy to be here.
Absolutely. Well, we are so excited to hear about your film, Stuffed, and just to hear a little bit more about the work that you're doing. And so I will go ahead and turn things over to you.
Yeah, let me share my screen really quick. Let's see. You see that okay?
Yep, looks like we're good to go.
Awesome. Excuse me. Yeah, so I'm really happy to be here. I'm excited to talk about Stuffed. It's been a couple of years since we finished the film and premiered at South by Southwest. That was one of the craziest moments of my career. I wasn't sure if we were going to get to South by and I was going to get like tomatoes thrown at me or like there were going to be people, mad about a film about dead animals, but it was sold out every single night and we had an incredible response. So that was really important to me, mostly because I love animals. That's my background is in environmental history. I love animals and nature, and I've always wanted to make a documentary about the environment that, Will, you'll appreciate this, isn't depressing. That is like somewhat exciting and inspiring and makes people love nature a little more than fear it or fear our future demise. I just wasn't sure how to do that. And I had an executive producer partner of mine, Rachel Price, reach out and she was like, well, what about taxidermy? And I was like, how dare you? I am a vegan. I'm an animal rights activist. Why would I ever want to do a documentary about dead animals? Like, that's crazy. But instead of saying, how dare you, she's a brilliant archivist herself. So I told her I would just spend the weekend and do some research. She told me to read this book. If you can see that, Kingdom Under Glass. It is a book by Jay Kirk, written about taxidermy, written about the history of taxidermy. And there it is. It just completely changed my mind. I had no idea that taxidermy required this mix, this combination of science and art. I had no idea how difficult it was. I didn't know the history of it. And I was kind of embarrassed by Sunday, just thinking, if I was able to change my mind so quickly without visuals, just with this one book, I could totally make a documentary that would very quickly educate people on something that they didn't even necessarily think they needed to know. So that's where we started. We knew we wanted to make a documentary about nature, getting people inspired by nature, using taxidermy as a vehicle. which I know to a lot of people sounds crazy. I want to share this clip just to give a little bit of backstory from Jay Kirk himself. This is in the movie, and it just talks a little bit about museum history and taxidermy. So let's see if we can get that playing.
Carl Akeley. He's the father of modern taxidermy.
I think I first found out about Carl Akeley when I was doing research. Some article or book I was reading, it mentioned the famous taxidermist Carl Akeley, who had once strangled a leopard with his bare hands. And so I made a little note to look into that later. I realized that there was more than enough for a whole book on him. I mean, the thing that intrigued me the most was like, oh, this is a great story about an artist. Just going to that much trouble, being that obsessed.
Carl Akeley was the man who said, we need to really elevate this art form from creating these animals with mediocre anatomy into these great sculptures.
The American Museum of Natural History, where he has the Hall of African Mammals, you know, he created a monumental piece of art. It would take 3 or 4 years to work on one elephant at a time.
To read about Akeley from the time I was a child, that work in the American Museum of Natural History was always my inspiration. He was basically the first one to really create this clay sculpted form of the anatomy of the animal and use that as the mannequin for the piece.
I think my first impression of Akeley was as if he was like a Tim Burton kind of character, you know, like morbid and dark. Johnny Depp would be like the perfect Akeley, just kind of zany. I loved the preposterous amount of work that he had to go to make his work. You know, you're literally traveling to Africa in 1900, which is like a ship ride, and then once he would be there, he would have a small army of painters and sculptors, and then like 150 native African porters carrying tons of their equipment with him just so he could do his art. Any animal he would kill, he was trying to work like a scientist and an artist, and he was incredibly meticulous about all the measurements and sketching, and then he would make these little clay maquettes. Prior to Akeley, a diorama might just be the animal inside the box. He had the finest landscape painters that were alive at the time to paint the backgrounds. And those painters themselves would go on these infinite expeditions, recreating the plants and getting the exact species of flora. During that period, part of the big shift in conservation has to do with scientists' revelation about ecology and what that term really means, which is that everything is interrelated. Habitat became just as important as the animal.
To get that leaf to really look like a leaf, or to get that rock to really look like a real rock, you really got to know what that rock looks like.
All right. I wanted to share that clip because I think Jay Kirk says it best. The big revelation I had making this documentary was that there was this link between art and science. And that was probably the most exciting epiphany I've had my entire life. That art and science are beautifully intertwined in so many fields. So now I look for it everywhere I go. And that's a tribute to taxidermy. The other thing I learned that was incredibly powerful was this vegan, cool filmmaker, thought I was the environmental activist, that I was the person protecting animals. And when I met these taxidermists, I realized that their love, their passion, their commitment to nature far exceeded mine. They spend 80% of their day in nature, watching, sketching, trying to understand movement and wing patterns. Then they're in the studio, and I mean, Travis, who's on the screen right now, I saw him over and over again restart project because it wasn't good enough, over and over again. These sculptures that I thought were incredibly beautiful, he didn't think were good enough, and he'd throw them in the trash. The people that are in this documentary were the ones that kind of pushed me to make it, despite everyone in LA saying, this isn't a documentary that people want to watch. It's not going to be beautiful. It's going to be depressing. It's going to be dark and scary. And I was like, no, it's nature. It's beautiful. I promise. And it was Travis and Alice and so many of the people in the documentary that kind of showed me that they are true naturalists and true environmentalists. Alice, let me grab Alice. She's the first person I met in the documentary. I saw this LA Times article about this female taxidermist. She used to work for Disney, and she got depressed that none of her art made it into the world. It just lived in this cloud. So she took a taxidermy class and turned out she was very, very good at it. She inspired me instantly to do something that was very female centered. As I've said before, both of my executive producers were women. I'm obviously like a female director. It was really important to me to show something you weren't expecting to see, which is this group of young women that are, bringing this old artwork or art form back to life. I wanted to share a little clip about Alice because part of this is in the movie, but some of it isn't. So that's kind of exciting.
I'm always better. I'm not good at the calls because everything I see is pretty much dead. But I've gotten good at. But I've gotten really good at IDing based on like flight pattern.
Oh, that's.
So it's like like the mockingbird. It's like 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the woodpecker is 1, 2. 1, 2.
They kind of do that little tuck in.
Yeah. Are they ground squirrels out here, or would they be rock squirrels? The one I saw was immature. Yep. This is when we need the desert specialty guys.
Oh.
Ooh, we have a... Really sickly come back. Oh wait, first winter, August to April. So we're in that range. That's it. So it's a white crown. It just didn't have the crown yet.
Yeah, that sounds a lot like what.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the whole reason for like kind of wanting to come out here is Europe, Roadrunner. I need a rock. Gonna have some of that hot green lichen on that rock.
Oh yeah.
And then I can even add, even if it's just a couple dried leaves, rather than have just a basic ground texture. And that just screams Joshua Tree. If I take a picture of my nail polish next to whatever I'm trying to match, I'll be able to see from the photo, adjust it and everything. And then if I know that this color is correct, then I know how to match that color. And this will be my little rock with the lichen on it.
All right. I love that scene. Only a portion of that made it into the movie, just to show how much field work they have to do, from like the color of lichen to, that perfect texture on a rock, which she took a Roadrunner to the European show and won a bunch of awards. And that shoot, just as a side note, was like one of my favorite shoots of all time. It was a small crew. We went into Joshua Tree. We heard animals all night. We were in little tents and we were just terrified. But it was so much fun to see that and, to just be with them and learn from them, because you like literally can't be around these people without learning something. So this is part of the crew, exec producer Rachel Price. We had a blast. Anytime we were in a preserve, they would put animals on top of the crew. I mean, I have that's some of my fondest memories, was getting to work with these animals. One of the things I said in the very first day, when we started pre-production, was I want 50% of all footage to be outdoors. I didn't want to get bogged down in the studio, get bogged down in interior shots, because that's not where taxidermists live. Taxidermists live in both environments. So I wanted to show them outdoors in nature as much as possible. Because Alice goes to local California nature preserves on a regular basis just to monitor the animals, watch the animals. They usually she'll do pro bono taxidermy for them if they need it for any kind of university. So I wanted to be a part of that world as well. And I think that was a big shock to people who had heard about the film but hadn't seen it. They weren't expecting to see so much alive, so many living animals. And then we had a production company from Canada who I met at a film festival. They overheard I was making a documentary on taxidermy, and Kalina Kiff, whose dad is a prominent ornithologist, said, "We want in. How can we help?" And they're how we got to Africa, and we're able to film, really, really incredible animals and add to that 50-50 environment. This is the last clip, and it's just on, I think, one of my favorite, obviously my favorite part of the doc is the animals, but seeing live animals, not in a preserve, because in a preserve, and the one we filmed at in California, they had been burned in wildfires. They were animals trying to recover, or endangered animals that needed some protection. In Africa, we were like in the bush with, anti-poaching people beside us and lions in the grass below us, like just completely raw nature. And getting to film that was like, truly, a dream come true. So this is a little scene from Africa with Travis.
I get to study nature, and that is the most satisfying thing in the world. I'm from Zimbabwe, as well as South Africa. The art of taxidermy is the combination of being an artist and being a naturalist. You've got to understand how to capture that expression. You find a special bond with wildlife and animals because you're viewing them in a different light. I started leaning towards doing big cats. The African lion always sort of captivated me since I was a child.
But we have what everyone else wishes they did. We have Africa. I needed to be back here to ground myself back to who I am.
There we go.
Africa is who I am. It's in my blood. It's where the animals that inspire me to do the work I do are.
I get choked up just looking at those lions. There's this story in the beginning of filming our first day of Africa. We're all jet lagged and exhausted, and we're not thinking, and we just get in the truck with the gear. We don't have water. We don't have food. We have a guide with an AK-47, and that's it, in a truck. We're just holding on to the truck. And we run into this anti-poaching group, and they're mad. They're like, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" And as soon as we said we were making a documentary about animals, they got so excited, and they were like, "Come with us. We just spotted a rhino, and if you're quiet, you can follow us." And I was like, "Oh, okay, okay. So we don't have water. We're not even thinking. We just get off and we start following these people, and we're gone all day. We have no clue that we are going into a full day's hike with nothing. I mean, you see how pale I am. I was sunburnt like crazy by the end of the day, like blistered. And when we got back, they gave us this like huge feast, and we're eating and just talking about how amazing that day was, because it ended with that scene of the lions in the dark. And they said, oh, by the way, when we met you, you were walking through the bush. There were lionesses and cubs all around you. And I was like, what are you talking about? And they were like, you were walking through lionesses and cubs. And I was like, no, I had no clue. I mean, we're just like idiot filmmakers, like walking through that. I mean, it was so insane to do. But, you know, we had such a high for getting to watch these animals. We got to watch, I mean, if you watch the documentary, it's like so many things that could have killed us, these huge elephants that didn't make it into the documentary. But I've never seen a wild elephant in Africa, like, you know, and I was so close to it. I thought for sure, like Carl Akeley's book, I'm going to get trampled, you know, like this elephant's totally going to kill me. Like, it was just crazy. So I brought this press quotes up only because when we made the documentary, we were told by so many producers and so many people that it was gross and nobody wanted to see it. And it was just really awesome to get words like enchanting and gorgeous and charming. It's like, we told you that's what it was. But it was also like being at South by, and we did a premiere at LA Natural History Museum and did premieres all over the world. But the taxidermists came with me, and they were just so excited to get recognition for the first time, because these are artists that if you go to a typical natural history museum, they will reference the landscape artist, but they don't reference the taxidermist. And that sucks, you know, for the taxidermist who did all of the work. So it was really exciting, I think, for them to get recognized as artists, even if it was briefly in a documentary, you know. That was really exciting for me. And that's it. That's my documentary. Let me pull out of this share really quick. Oh, sorry. There we go. Hi.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Erin, for sharing a little bit of your story and to, I mean, just show the magic of what can be in the world of taxidermy and how diverse it is. So to our audience, if you have questions, we have the chat open ready for you to enter your questions for Erin. But we're, you know, on a little bit of a delay here. So I'm going to start things off with, we did get a comment in the chat of Ginny saying, I'm taking a taxidermy class at my local community college right now, which is super exciting. But I would, you know, love to kind of hear a little bit about, in your process through the filmmaking of learning about the like process of learning to become a taxidermist. You can talk a little bit about like some of the taxidermists, how they learned to be a taxidermist, and, you know, what can someone do today?
Yeah, I mean, they all took a small course. I think Alice went out of town, little weekend vacation by herself, and took a course out of state. Now Alice offers courses almost daily at this point, from early, like people who've never done taxidermy to people who want to really, you know, refine their skills. Just reach out, I would say, to your local museum or a taxidermist if you know them, and start with a really small, I would start with like a day course and see if you like it. Because when I did this, you know, I was vegan and people were like, who are you? Like, are you PETA? Like, what do you know, what are you here to do? So I had to kind of prove myself a little bit with them and get my hands dirty to prove that I wasn't going to misrepresent them. And they had me help with the zebra in the documentary, which is a baby zebra, a zebra foal. It was so hard to even watch like this, that this, was like a stillborn baby. But they needed help. It was a two-man job of holding the skin back and using the scalpel. And I stepped in because they were doing it and it was taking a long time. So I stepped in to help so we could have 4 people working at the same time. And it was crazy how quick my brain just went to science. Like this is precision. This is perfect. You need to focus. And with a little bit of peppermint oil under my nose, because the smell is not great. It was incredible. It was really a special thing. I would totally do it again.
Awesome. Another question in the chat comes in here from David. What have you learned about all of the various places where taxidermy is done all over America and beyond?
I think what was fun was we got to film the World Show. That's kind of the end of the documentary. And this is people from all over the world. This is a rabbit from the China team, all over the US. And it's funny because these people, for the most part, work by themselves. It's a solitary lifestyle. So when they do a project together, or when they come to a world show or a national show or a state show, we filmed all of them. We filmed state shows, regional shows, and the world show. They're so excited to talk to each other. And you'll see like Alice, who's this like super glam LA girl with like a guy in a cowboy hat and cowboy boots from Iowa that lives on a farm. And they're besties. They are instantly best friends. That was really cool to me, that they speak this language that very few of us actually understand. So being in that energy was really cool. And yeah, they're all kind of, I had a couple of local to North Carolina taxidermists come to a local premiere a year and a half ago. And they were expecting to see something that was like, not representing them well. And they came to me afterwards and were like, oh my God, like, that's it. Like, maybe people won't think we're creepy anymore after this documentary. I was like, I don't know. We'll see. They have to watch it. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things as I was watching the documentary, and really encourage everyone in the audience to go and watch this documentary. You can see it on a variety of platforms. But one of the kind of the themes that I picked out while watching it is the cycle of life, death, and life again. And when you were kind of learning about that, like, how did you interpret that? You coming from being thinking about being a vegan and kind of this whole process, how do you interpret that kind of process of life, death, and life again?
I've got kind of 2 answers to this question, but I wrote this piece. Oh God, I can't even remember what magazine it was for, but I wrote this piece where I talked about how before this documentary, I was afraid of death. I was terrified of it. It even, I used to hike, but I would do day hikes and it would have to be with people. And once I started this film, I started backpacking, hiking alone, climbing, highlining, like literally didn't fear death anymore. Because I viewed it so differently. It's just this part of life that happens to every single living thing on the planet. And it just made me so much calmer. And anytime I get anxious or get like overwhelmed with life, I just remember that feeling, because it's very cathartic to feel like there isn't an end. The other side of this is in the documentary at the beginning, there were these graphics, these incredible graphics that we had illustrated that show the bone that turns into the muscle, that turns into the skin. And I had this dream basically where I see the taxidermist is like desperately trying to bring this animal back to life. They want you to look at it and wonder for a second, is that real? Is that alive? They don't want you to go, oh, dead, It's really hard. This is something that every single taxidermist has said to me, it's very hard to make something look alive that isn't alive. So they dream and they obsess about this idea of bringing it back to life. So I thought, how cool would it be for the movie to start with an animation of these animals coming back to life? And that was, that was something that started like probably our first shoot I thought of, and it kind of trickled all the way down to this obsession with showing something living again. With the zebra foal, for example, it never got to live, so their taxidermy pose for him was him standing for the first time, covered in blood and fluids and stuff from being born, but standing in grass for the first time. So kind of gifting him back a moment of life. And that to me is just, hearing these stories that start with these, a lot of the people in the documentary obsessed over animals, even when they were really little, like they would see a dead bird on the ground and go, how do I make it come back to life? And that's where this started. So it's like, it's this beautiful, very nurturing thing, I think, in people, which is funny because in media, taxidermists are creepy. They love death. They're always the villain. But from what I've seen, they're all like sweethearts. Not all, I'm sure there's some terrible exceptions, but the ones that I met were very, very sweet and very connected to nature and also connected to life, not to death.
Yeah. Another question coming in is, we'll get to a little bit at the end as well, but since it's come in, is Emmeline asks what your next big projects are, and have you learned anything from your past documentary work that you want to use in any of your future projects?
Yeah, I think Stuffed taught me that the industry doesn't know all. The industry that said this would never work, nobody would ever watch it, was wrong. And it happens time and time again. You think you make a successful doc. I got signed to WME. Now I'm with UTA. That you get these big agencies and all of a sudden everybody says yes. But in reality, if you want to do anything unique, anything exciting, you have to push back because they're not going to want you to do it. I'm working on an AI documentary right now that is another kind of blend of science and art, in that we're talking about these famous science fiction movies and did they get some of it right? Did they get some of it wrong? I'm working with, Appian Way and Mike Medavoy, who made almost every movie from my childhood that I loved. And even with these big hitters beside me and this incredible topic and all of the biggest people in AI signed on, we still have to fight to tell an authentic story rather than tell this pre-branded, ready to throw on a streamer, extreme version of the story. We have to fight for the actual authentic storytelling. That I wasn't expecting. I think most filmmakers think once you make it, once you have an agent and you have big names attached to your project, that you will just soar. And in reality, if you want to make this kind of stuff, stuff that is a little, I don't know, not dangerous to make, but, just something that isn't immediately a win, it's going to take you a lot longer. But I have this ridiculous confidence from Stuffed where they look at me and they're like, oh, that's not going to work. And I'm like, you don't know. So that's what I take away from Stuffed, is if I can make a doc about taxidermy work, I'm pretty sure I can do this. And that's, yeah. And just how good I felt when that movie came out and how good I still feel when I talk to Alice or Travis or any of the other people in the doc. I just get so happy. I never want to get rid of that. So I'm working on the AI doc, and I'm also working on a wellness documentary called Healthy Lies that is talking about the fraudulent nature of the wellness industry. So that is another one where most documentaries that are in the wellness or health field live in the extremes. They want you to be vegan. They want you to be a carnivore. They want you to do ice plunges or, very extreme versions of health. And I've got a trainer from The Biggest Loser, Arnold Schwarzenegger's right hand, like all of these big people coming on to say, these are all lies. These are all marketing tactics. None of this is actually going to help you. Here are the things that will help you, and they're actually free. So, yeah, making really good documentaries right now, but I miss my animals. So I got to make another one with animals.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like some great projects. Coming back to stuffed, another question comes in that I think is a question that when you see, the final taxidermy, you don't always think about the question of where do taxidermists acquire the animals they work with?
Yeah. Yeah, it's from all over. I think before I started this documentary, I assumed everybody was a hunter and they were mounting their, their kills, and I didn't film a single version of that. We filmed, not that I have anything against that lifestyle or that type, but we were more focused on, like, we filmed a mountain lion that had been run over in LA, and a local nature center asked if Alice would do a pro bono piece to show what urban areas are doing to wildlife. So she left the road rash on his shoulder and on his face a little bit, and really tried to tell the story of, we are taking away these animals' habitat. The zebra also came from a preserve. For the most part, I filmed the top taxidermists in the world. So these are people that are getting endangered species to be essentially taxidermied for a museum or for some kind of exhibit, or they were doing pro bono pieces for natural history, local centers, that kind of thing. So at the other thing about the specimens that I think people don't know, I certainly didn't know, is animals are protected beyond death. So you can't find an owl in your backyard and taxidermy it or take it. You could go to jail. You can't do that. So that's something I didn't know, that if you find a bird or anything like that, you have to have it documented. It doesn't matter that it died on your property. Alice gets those phone calls constantly, just like, I found this eagle. And she's like, sorry, like, can't do anything about that. So that was super fascinating, that she opens up her freezer. They call it the frozen zoo. Most taxidermists do. She opens up her freezer and she has all these specimens, and they all have these little tags, and the tags say documentation of where it comes from, what it died of, every kind of ID that's necessary for state and federal law. So it's hard. It's a lot of work to get the specimens.
Yeah. Thinking about some of the other, you're mentioning kind of the kind of more wildlife side of things. There was another question that come in talking a little bit more about the artistic side. Can you talk a little bit more about Sinki and Ventongren and the artistry of their work, and especially how it integrates in architectural pieces?
They're so amazing. I can't, like, the first time. Okay, so a little backstory on Yop and Ferry. They live in Amsterdam. They had one of the top, if not the top, marketing agencies in the Netherlands. Like, they were like top dog creative designers, creative artists. They got the idea to become taxidermists. They quit their company, started being taxidermists from scratch, from nothing, and wanted to do it with, like, the grandest, most extreme version. So they're not just finding these, like, endangered or these kind of rare animals or these really beautiful kind of birds that and putting them in beautiful poses, but they're spending half of the year looking for architectural pieces for things to go with that specimen. Whether it's the dome that's 250 years old, the glass dome, or it's a piece of a door or a piece of a handle. It's all very, very rare, everything that they do. And they sit in this studio, this huge studio, and I think it's Haarlem, Belgium. And it's filled with all this stuff. I mean, it's like an artist's dream. Like you walk in and it's like so many things from history. They've got like cameras set up in the ceiling to really get them inspired for different angles and how to approach things. And it's a different world. It's a totally, whereas Alice in her studio, she's working with, when I was filming her, she was working with teensy tiny little hummingbirds for the Huntington Museum. So she's doing this, you know, and they're in this massive white space filled with history, filled with specimens, a soap bath where there's, you know, birds in there floating, like just truly in like just totally different worlds. And then Travis is like sitting in essentially in the bush in Africa, like sculpting out of clay from scratch. I mean, he made my face over lunch, was just like, look, it's you. And I'm like, what? You know, these people are like next level. I mean, next level artists. Not just that side, but the watching Yop airbrush a face. Like I would have wrecked that second one. And I mean, every little thing he did, it was like this tiny little paintbrush and this airbrush. And it was just incredible to watch them both work. They're special.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that kind of like how this film kind of connects basically art, science, and history in a really amazing way that even for me, you know, having done a little bit of taxidermy as an intern actually at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Science after college, to kind of see how these different areas kind of tie in with each other. And now that you've seen a bunch of different, you know, forms of taxidermy throughout the filming process, whenever you go to a museum on your own, can you not just enjoy it, or do you have this brand new perspective that you can't see it in the same way anymore?
Oh my God, I just enjoy it so much more. Like going to the LA Natural History Museum after filming, after a year of filming, past filming there, because we filmed there a few times as well. It was like I just had this different kind of appreciation for what I was looking at, for how insanely hard what they're doing is, especially habitat. I am so obsessed and so picky about habitat now. Like if I look down at the ground of a diorama and it's dusty, I'm like, come on, you know. And same with like, because it's super kitschy, you know, in places to have taxidermy on the wall and like, you know, fancy restaurants, you'll see like, and if it's dusty or if the eyes are not shiny, I'm like, what are you doing? Like, fix it. I usually text one of the people in the movie a screenshot, a close-up of the problem area, and they like have panic attacks. They're like, wow, why? Tell them to hire us to come over there and fix it. But yeah, I love it. I love it now. And I think I appreciate wildlife that much more because you know, the stuff about the flight patterns that Alice was talking about, just little things where I look up and I'm like, oh yeah, like, or just the things she taught me about hummingbirds. When I see hummingbirds off of my porch now, I'm like, oh, right, they do that for this. Like, yeah, I think there's a lot to be learned from taxidermy still. And from, I love interactivity in museums. I started in museums. But I also love dioramas. I think they have a lot to give still.
Yeah. Definitely want to also just call out, you know, we've got still about 15 minutes left for questions. So please get your questions into the chat, everyone. But I've got another question for you here. That from when I was watching that the kind of modern, I'll say quote unquote modern, you know, era of taxidermy is fairly a young field in many regards. And so I'm kind of curious, like, how has taxidermy influenced conservation perception in the national culture?
You know, I think when this movie first well, probably towards the end of it being filmed, the museum world knew about it because I had filmed, the top people that they're working with, or I had filmed in the museum itself. And they kind of saw it as like, maybe this is our last breath of like, maybe this documentary can help the conservation side of things by getting people more interested in, similar to everything that I'm saying, all these awakenings that I had in making the movie, maybe that will happen for other people based on this movie, specifically for preserving taxidermy and not throwing it in the trash and replacing it with a robot. And I really tried to be a part of that movement anytime I was asked my opinion or asked for footage or whatever by a museum, because I think conservation right now needs to be approached from every angle possible, so we can kind of touch on every kind of mind. And for whatever reason, even though I'm a filmmaker, being around animals, being around like in a conservation area or in front of taxidermy at a diorama, that's what spoke to me. And I heard that quite a few times from people I filmed in the rehabilitation centers, that there are some kids that like didn't really care seeing like a fur for the first time or seeing a live owl. But there were some kids that just couldn't stop staring and like couldn't let go and were just so, and I think those kids need those moments as much as humanly possible, because I grew up with that. I grew up going to museums and grew up going to these preserves and seeing animals in real life. But I think the younger generation needs a little bit more of that to keep conservation moving in the right direction.
Yeah. Another question coming in here from Chip asking, while making the film, did you learn how the eyes of the animals are made?
Yeah, they're glass. So there are whole companies and people fight over which one's the best company, but the eyes are glass and they're their own art form. I should have brought down, I have a few in my jewelry box. When I was making the film, I would randomly get boxes from taxidermists, and it was always a joke, but it was something like, one time it was like freeze dried like turtles that like teensy tiny little ones, and just a bunch of like random stuff, and then band-aids because I was like accident prone filming, constantly cutting myself by accident and tripping, and they were like, anytime you send something to Erin, you have to send band-aids at the same time. So yeah, sweet stuff like that. But yeah, they're glass and they're highly specialized. Alice showed me once with a, I forget what kind of bird. I think it was the European starling. She showed me what it looked like with the wrong eye. And it looks crazy. Like even just the tiniest little difference. She has these drawers that are like this big, dozens of them going down, and they're all different sized eyes. It's crazy.
Very cool.
Mhm.
And that's I got to kind of be a bit of a cottage industry of specific. What do you make? I make eyes for taxidermy. That's all I do.
How do you? Yeah, I mean that's a very, and I think some of them do their own, but like, yeah, it's like its own art form in and of itself. It's crazy.
Yeah. Specifically, also thinking, with its being March and Women's History Month, I also want to call out the fact that not only you being a women director, but also you had a bunch of other amazing women on this film. And can you talk a little bit about like what it was like, kind of I would think traditionally, historically, taxidermy was a very male-dominated field. Can you talk a little
Yeah.
about like what it was like with working so many women on this film?
It was so cool. It was really awesome because there were a handful of older men, veteran taxidermists that are the reason people like Alice and Travis and Olivia and all of the other women in the documentary, why they are where they are. Like they had help. They had these powerhouses in the industry helping them getting, feedback from them. Oh, this looks wrong because you missed this side of how they bend, like, that was really cool to watch, because that's my career as well. Like, I'm a female director. I had 2 female exec producers, fully financed by women. That was awesome. But we were all, helped or, influenced by these powerhouse men that gave us advice and mentorship as well. So I love feeling like, that kind of the camaraderie that comes in my field, but also seeing it in taxidermy. But it was like the world shows mostly men, a lot of men. And then a handful of women that were winning awards and really, really crushing it, really dedicated, like Alice. And when we were there, the winner of the overall world show was a woman with a red panda. But yeah, I mean, I think people right now in general are craving more physicality, more tactile, more of a tactile relationship with art and with their work. I certainly am. I didn't used to ever really hold the camera. Now I'm shooting a ton myself. I just want to feel what it is to do the work, And I think the meticulous nature, the really like kind of fine tuning that taxidermy requires is so perfect for all of the women that I filmed. Like, I don't think they would have, I don't think they could find a better art form. I think it's the perfect art form for them. So yeah, it was really cool to film a bunch of women, and behind the scenes have a bunch of women. It was great. The person who sold the film, also a woman, like just across the board.
Wow.
Yeah, that's really rare. We were like the only one at South by that had that story, which was, and that we were getting no's like across the board from all of our counterparts. So it was just a success story. It was exciting.
Well, we've only got a few minutes left, so I'll kind of wrap up with the last question here of thinking also about, young up and coming filmmakers. You've got quite a few films under your belt now, and you also, are kind of splitting the world of, you're based here in North Carolina, but you've worked in LA as well. What advice do you have for kind of, young up and coming filmmakers, or people who may not have a traditional background in filmmaking but are interested in this kind of aspect of storytelling? What kind of advice do you have?
Yeah, I mean, my master's is in history. I have no education background in filmmaking. I just took an internship at PBS in grad school as a researcher, and that quickly turned into, no, you're a camera girl. Get over there, go film stuff. And I was like, okay. And then ended up loving it, and that I switched my entire career. But I think my success, and this is what I say to every single person that asks me, is I didn't wait for someone to say yes. I just started shooting. My first documentary was basically cost nothing. And I did almost every job myself. And I took it to film festivals and went all over the world with it and sold it worldwide to, it was my first film. It's okay. It's got a lot of heart, but lots of mistakes. I would say make something and put it out there. Film festivals are where I've gotten almost all of my funding. They are where I've gotten all of my partnerships, almost all of my partnerships. They are an incredible place for a filmmaker. Show up when you have something. Don't show up and go to the parties. Like, show up when you have something to share. And even if you don't love it, put it out there. That's just Will, you know that. That's like the number one rule, is like film something and put it out into the world. And that will start your career, whether you're ready or not,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we were just about wrapping up all of our questions here. I want to say a big thank you to you, Erin, so much for taking some time to share about Stuffed and about your work. And that will just about wrap up this week's Lunchtime Discovery series. So
Thank you.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you all to all of you as well for tuning in to this week's Lunchtime Discovery series, brought to you by the North Carolina Office of Environmental Education and in collaboration with the North Carolina Museum of Natural Science. My name is Wolf Rind. I've been a guest host. Chris will be back next week with another Lunchtime Discovery series. We'll be welcoming special guest, our DEQ Secretary, Bizer, from our very own state government, to continue with our Women's History Month of highlighting for the Lunchtime Discovery series. But with that, thank you all so much, and we will see you all next week. Bye, everyone.